welcome once again to Civil Engineering Today. I'm Cristina Fragoso.
And I'm Brockman.
And on today's show, we have a very special guest, Charles Button. And we're going to be looking at the Water Resource Authority here in Massachusetts. And Reed, give us some history.
Yes, the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority is, well, Charlie's going to tell us a whole lot more about it. He's the chief engineer, and whenever you're using water in any way, shape, or form, in this area particularly, that's the group that's bringing your water to you. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to Charlie Button.
Thank you. Pleasure.
So, Charlie, you're the chief engineer of the Mass Water Resources Authority. When we're talking water resource, you mean your group's responsible for like every source of water in Massachusetts, or just a part of Massachusetts?
Just a part. We were charged by special act of the legislature in the mid-'80s to provide water and sewer services, and basically for the environment inside 128, the communities inside 128.
Okay. And then we also know that, Boston residents, they're more familiar with Boston water and sewer, since that's where they pay their bill to. How are the two of you related?
Boston Water and all the communities act as retailers. We're like a wholesaler to a retailer. I live in Boston, as a matter of fact. And the MWRA takes the water from the big reservoirs, does the treatment, and distributes it to all the member communities. The communities then have their own piping system, which sends it to people's homes for the drinking water. And then when people in the homes use that and flush it, it goes back into the local community pipes, which then connect to our bigger pipes out to Deer Island for treatment of the wastewater to make it clean before it goes out into the ocean.
And you were just talking a little bit earlier, statistically we get pretty good rainfall. And in the history of all this piping systems, you actually, it's very old. Can you tell us a little bit about the history?
We are fortunate to have about 44 inches of rain a year compared to Las Vegas, where they might get 9 inches a year. So we have a good source of supply. The piping system evolved. Spring Street, downtown Boston, was called that. It used to be a spring there from which people drank.
Makes sense.
Guess why Water Street is named Water Street? The first real piping system came from Jamaica Pond. That went online in 1796, not 18, but 1796, and wooden pipes went from Jamaica Pond down to Water Street in downtown Boston. And since then, it's evolved. As the demand got bigger, the reservoirs went further and further west, where one, the water was clean, and two, there was the land to build the reservoir system, ultimately ending up with the system we use now at the Quabbin that went online in the early 1940s.
But no more wooden pipes out there.
No more wooden pipes. There's few in the street, and I've got a couple of souvenirs that we dug up years ago. It's all metal pipes that are actually providing the water. And in fact, there was a big ceremony in the 1850s where water, because of iron pipes, was able to be pressurized enough, and there's a ceremony that had 100,000 people on Boston Common celebrating the fact that the water now had pressure, and they were concerned about that because of major fires in the 1850 that burned down a lot of Boston. Paul Revere's house is the only wooden building surviving.
Oh, really?
Notice a lot of
this.
old brick buildings around that were made of brick specifically because they weren't able to fight the fires in the old days.
So, with our water coming from the Quabbin, how does that make us really compare with like other communities around the country?
We're very fortunate. The water quality is so clean that we're one of half a dozen communities in the country that don't have to do filtration. Seattle is one because of the reservoirs way up in the hills where nobody lives. We have that similar situation. The water quality is so good we treat it, but we don't have to do filtration. We disinfect it so there's no bacteria there from something the deer might have left behind up in the woodland areas. And we put fluoride in it to help with your teeth. And otherwise, the treatment is minimal because it's so good to begin with. Other places in the country that are using water from rivers have to do a much more advanced level of treatment because of what's in the rivers.
Now, last year, I know that we had a little bit of a learning experience where the taps were off in Boston for a while, and it had something to do with backup water supplies. Can you explain how that works?
Well, what happened is you need a backup water supply. If something goes wrong, you need another source, and there are a lot of redundant pipes, smaller ones, all over the place. Communities do it, and we do it as well. This one was a redundant pipe that was built actually in the 1930s up to the 1950s, and we used that one when the newer pipe had a break. We in fact are rehabilitating the old one right now, so the transition, if something like that should ever happen again, or if the population grows, we'll have an adequate supply for it all. But you need that redundancy, just like you have in your house with the electricity. If the power line goes down there, the electric company can feed it from another direction. We have the capability, and the member communities have the capability for doing that also.
Okay, that's good.
So
And-
when it went to the local, the towns and, and the more local water supplies, were you guys still overseeing that, or was that the local towns that were really?
It was a joint venture. The communities look to their own water supply technology and sampling. There's a sampling protocol, and they have the laboratories set up in their health departments. We work with the state health department and all the member communities to coordinate all of that and get the service back really,
Yeah, it was
really quickly.
Really quickly.
Yeah.
It was, I was, you had the water's being tested constantly anyway, though, right?
Yes.
So it was
We
just
do it
making
on
sure.
we do it on a regular basis, depending on the population. A small community might do it once or twice a day. We take 50 samples a day from all the member communities and from our system because we serve so many people, just to make sure.
Now, it sounds like we have a really good filtration system and newer pipes coming out there, but we were talking a little bit earlier about infrastructure and our infrastructure, the pipes. You said there's some redundant pipes. Like, how is that being addressed? Or when things break, is that when they get replaced or updated, or how does that work? How do they keep track of the infrastructure?
What you should do is the communities, as we do and as Boston Water and Sewer and other communities have done, is to provide a plan, a capital plan, so that over a period of years you identify certain pipes from which you've had leaks, from which you've had a break, to be replaced. You have to fix the leak when it occurs, but based on the history of the pipe, the age of the pipe, other sorts of things, an area which is developed and grown where you need a bigger pipe, you look at all those kinds of things and you put it in your capital improvement plan. And that capital plan is financed with the rates that people pay to keep the system upgraded. It's analogous to, you have to maintain the highways, you got to fix the potholes, so we got to fix the leaks, but then every once in a while you got to repave the whole road. We have to rebuild the whole pipes.
Well, that's good to know.
So you guys are really like a large-scale version of what the local communities have to go through. They have to make the same decisions.
Yes.
And work the same way.
Yes.
It sounds like you guys have a better system in place than maybe some. I know there was issues with like old electrical lines and everything. You guys seem like you're pretty good. I mean,
Well, thank you.
the majority of water leaks that we hear about is rare.
It's very rare. One of the best examples of an agency that's done well is Boston Water and Sewer Commission. When they were formed in 1978 and through the early 80s, they had about a leak a week.
Oh, wow.
And now you'll see 3 or 4 a year. But they've spent 20 years of rehabilitation and new pipelines and fixing this and fixing that. So they're at the point now where they've rehabilitated a tremendous amount of the systems, as have some other communities. One, it cuts down the leaks and the inconvenience to people, and it doesn't blow a hole in the road when the pipe leaks. But two, it's an investment in the infrastructure, so it'll last for a long time. And around here, the water's not corrosive, and the soil is not too aggressive, so those systems last for quite a while. It's a good investment.
I'm a big believer in investing in your infrastructure.
Yes.
Of course.
And what I understand, you're not just in charge of, we've been talking water supply, but you're also oversee, the wastewater well as well. So basically, I know it's kind of a gross question, but when you flush a toilet, what happens?
Well, we supply the communities with clean water. They supply it to the homeowners. When they use it, flush the toilet, that stuff gets carried away in the community pipes, then to our bigger pipes, and then out to Deer Island for treatment. And that's a big, big, big deal. Again, when this area was first founded, there were outhouses or there were nothing. There's a book called A Political History of Wastewater, and it was published by an MIT student a few years ago that talks about what Boston went through in the 1800s to consolidate all of that and to get that stuff from running into the Mystic River and running into the Charles River and running into the
They have,
Neponset.
Like cholera outbreaks? Is that what's
Well, that triggered some of the stuff in London, for example, in the 1850s. The cholera outbreak led to people thinking about the connection between disease and water quality. So that led more to the water treatment, but people also thought about getting the wastewater away from every little stream. I mean, it literally, some places ran down in the gutters 150 years ago. Good news is that doesn't happen anymore, but you had to get it to some place to get it away. The Deer Island first plant went online in 1892, and it was the point at which a lot of pipes took that wastewater and brought it out into the ocean, treated some of the coarser material, removed it, and then pumped it out into the ocean. And it wasn't the high level of treatment that's done today, but it was better than having it filling up the Mystic Lakes, filling up all the places around the area, filling up the Muddy River type of thing. It took it away from where people were, and it was a tremendous health improvement when that was built and went online. In 1892, the Boston Water and Sewer Commission put online their Boston Main Interceptor. It collected a lot of stuff. It discharged into the ocean, but again, it wasn't in everybody's backyard. And it was a tremendous advance at the time, and as time goes by, and as you learn more about it and the public health implications, you get better and better. A fellow by the name of Koch in Germany in 1896 came up with the germ theory of disease. Before that, people didn't even know about germs. So you ask, why wasn't there better treatment? Because people didn't know the connection. Why didn't we treat before? The Imhoff tanks came from Europe in 1920s. The first treatment in this country was the Imhoff tanks. Didn't know how. Sounds kind of silly to say it today, but every year, every day, we see technological advances in another field. Those were made over the last 100 years to get to the point where we are now today for both water treatment and for wastewater treatment.
Aside from wastewater treatment, I know, do you have anything to do with stormwater?
We end up dealing with stormwater on Deer Island and some other places from so-called combined communities, of which Boston is the largest. Again, it has to do with age. In the old days, it didn't make sense to put two pipes in the street if they both went to the river or the ocean.
Right.
And again, the Imhoff tanks didn't come here. So there was no sense building any of that stuff until the 20s. And since the 1920s, all the sewer systems in Boston have been separated. So anyway, we deal with combined sewage. Boston is separating a lot of it and putting the stormwater in the receiving waters and the wastewater to us for treatment. But when it rains, you see an upswing in the flow, and that's why Deer Island has such a large capacity. We have an average daily demand of about 330 million gallons a day, but during a storm, it'll peak up to, a big storm, it'll peak up to 1.3 billion.
Jeez.
You put that in perspective, the Charles River is 400 million. Deer Island on a big storm gets 3 times the flow of the Charles River.
That's crazy.
And we
Yes.
were talking earlier, about Deer Island and how it was designed, and the fact that global warming is creating heavier water flow into the system. I mean, can you talk a little bit about what Deer Island has in place to combat?
We can, actually. When the old Deer Island plant, the water level was raised 35 feet for hydraulic reasons to deal with pumping. But then in addition to that, went up another 4 feet in the treatment level and in how it gets out into the ocean. Because at the time, I thought the designers were pretty innovative and were thinking about, it wasn't called global warming at the time, but what would happen if the ocean would rise. So it's already built into the design of Deer Island. And it'll discharge by gravity, big storms, 100-year recurrence interval flood with a wave run-up and that extra 4 feet, and the plant is designed to handle that. On the drinking water side, we're looking at our many communities around Massachusetts, looking at if it's going to rain harder but less frequently, you got to catch more water. You got to supplement your reservoirs by either working on them or building more reservoirs to catch that water so it's available when people need it, when it doesn't rain, for periods when it doesn't rain.
So we're in good shape to deal with any upcoming
Massachusetts
problems.
is, and I think we, in the metropolitan area, between our communities and ourselves, have done a good job in making that a clean and an available and a safe water supply for people, and the treatment aspect, so when it's discharged into the ocean, it hasn't harmed any of the critters out there. We did 10 years of background study before the plant came online, and we've done 10 years of research since then, and it shows no impact from the wastewater coming out of Deer Island because it's treated so well.
And how often is that tested?
The major testing is done, well, the treatment level is tested on Deer Island multiple times a day. Out in the ocean, the major tests that are done basically monthly, recognizing sometimes when you get a bad winter, you can't be out there in a boat
No.
9 miles out doing that kind of stuff.
Makes sense.
So it's a very frequent testing, one, to see if there's an impact on the water, daily, multiple daily testing on Deer Island itself to make sure what's going out there is good.
Yep, that makes sense. You mentioned a little bit back that you had to collect the water, which means you guys get involved in dams a lot too. When you're making dams, are you also using those for like power as well?
Well, we've done that. Actually, the Department of Conservation and Recreation owns the dams and owns the reservoirs. The state does. We were charged with treating the water when our legislation came to be. But we collaborate with them. We've rehabilitated a bunch of dams. We've repointed some of the mortar in the masonry dams and the stone ones so that they don't leak.
Yep.
And they're high. They're west of the city, and they're outside, remember I said Jamaica Pond, then outside 128, and outside 495, all the way out to the Quabbin, which is west of Worcester, almost out to Springfield area. And that elevation is way above sea level, 530 feet above sea level. So as the water comes in, it feeds the communities. We serve 2.5 million people. It serves about 2/3 of those people by gravity. We don't have to pump it. Tremendous saver in building the pumps, not building the pumps, and the electricity cost over the last many, many, many years. But we're also able to make electricity from that, hydroelectricity, as the water comes in, to save on the electricity we use and to green energy for that matter.
So you use it all for your own, you don't sell it back to the grid? It's not
Depends
that-
on the area. If we have a facility nearby where we can use it, yes. Otherwise, we tie it into the grid. So we do
Makes
both.
sense.
So you make some money.
Yep. And offsets the rates that people pay for our water and sewer service.
That's
All
very
goes
good.
into the same treasury.
I don't know if everybody listening is going to have really idea how far away the Quabbin is, but that's a decent drive away.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's a lot of pipe. That's an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours.
A couple hours driving. It's about 60 miles if you could go straight. And it took a long, long time to do all of that stuff. There were major, major projects. Most of the stuff comes in by a tunnel. Tunnels took an awful long time to build in the old days. And they're below grade so that, one, they'll stay pressurized. And two, you can't build a 16-foot diameter pipe, a 10-foot diameter pipe down in the middle of a community street.
Right.
So you build it as a tunnel way, way below the ground. Some of our water tunnels are as big as the Ted Williams tunnel, or as big as probably the Sumner and Callahan are a better analogy. Ted is pretty big. But they're as big as those tunnels, and the tunnel going out from Deer Island to bring all of that flow and it's treated out to the ocean is 24 feet in diameter when it's all finished. So it's, again, as big as one of those transportation tunnels because it carries so much water. But they do take a lot of time, and a lot of people have worked on them, and a lot of money, quite frankly, to build that. But it makes more sense in each community having to do their own. Otherwise, you'd have all the communities inside 128 having their own well system or tapping into the Charles River or the Ipswich River or the Mystic River or whatever. And it would cost the people in those areas an awful lot more because of the inefficiency with the smaller systems versus all the treatment gets done in one place, and all the engineers and the biologists and the chemists and the electricians and the mechanics that run all of that are localized at the one place, runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But by not having to staff 50 of those, you don't have all those chemists and biologists and what have you to make it a run. Same thing with the drinking water system.
No, I know you were talking earlier, a very interesting history as far as, as they moved west, how they planned it. But can you tell us, I was just shocked when you told me that there are people who think the water comes from the Charles River. How did the history?
Well, it's kind of out of sight and out of mind. And nobody around now, basically, that remembers, people remember the Quabbin and the system for that. But nobody remembers the stuff before 1900. And people had tremendous foresight, the plan on that 100 years ago, 150 years ago, to make that all work, and we're the beneficiaries of it. It's just very fortunate that that all happened when it happened. Communities and the system went west as more water was needed. The Jamaica Pond Reservoir wasn't big enough. And then the next one needed bigger and bigger and bigger. And as you go further west where there was no people living, the water quality was cleaner. There was nothing there, no industries dumping into it, nothing. So the water was really, really clean as a consequence of that.
You've actually, the facilities, I went on a tour of Deer Island. It's an amazing facility. You give tours of that, right? So if there's schools, can they arrange to come out and have tours?
Yes, and we have a number of things that we do with students, one of which is Mass Water Resources Educational School Program, and that lists a whole bunch of things that are publications for various ages of kids in school, all the way from kindergarten for some of them to grade 12 for some of them. Those publications are available. And we have a system whereby we'll do school tours, not just call out for 2 or 3 kids to go out, but your school, if you're in the service area, basically inside 128, your science department can arrange with our folks at Deer Island to get a tour. And on the reservoir system, you can arrange with the Department of Conservation and Recreation to do tours of the reservoir system and get an explanation of how it works. And it, quite frankly, is better able to understand it when you see it rather than just the publications. But we do publications for younger kids on storm drains and how they all work.
Dwayne.
Dwayne the storm drain.
Is it MWRA.gov? That's the website? So people go there, they can see
They can
what
see
sort
what's
of
available.
outreach?
Yep. No, actually not gov. www.mwra.com. And that'll
Okay.
take to the main site, and then you can go to various
easier.
facilities. A healthy environment starts home, and how to do clean and green things in your home and not generate
not
so
just
much
for
waste.
kids.
Bay State fertilizer, what happens to the stuff after we clean it up in Deer Island? Make fertilizer out of it, out of the solids that come out. The clean water goes out into the ocean. The stuff what comes out of the water can be
Sustainable
used
system.
for, yes, it's sustainable, can be used for fertilizer on trees and lawns and stuff like that.
Well, we'll be sure to put a link on
Oh,
our
definitely.
website,
Please
also
do.
onto yours.
Yeah.
And we want to thank you so much for coming in. I mean,
Really,
the show could have
this-
gone on a lot longer,
It could
actually.
have, and
It's
you've
interesting.
shed a lot of, it seems people just take their water for granted. And so generally, we're the Boston Society of Civil Engineers, and our job is infrastructure. And the infrastructure just seems to be something that people, sort of take for granted. And shedding the light on it really makes a big difference.
Thank you. I'm glad I was able to do a bit to help, but pipes are in the ground, you don't see them, and
Well-
you don't think about it till there's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. But fortunately, they're few and far between. Well, we want to thank you, and maybe if we can have you on at a future date on a new project or something you're working on, we'd love to have you again.
Sure.
And if there's students listening, or teachers, or parents that are from 6th to 8th grade, we're kicking off our Future City competition. And if you just go to www.engineeryourfuture.org, you can go on there, you can register for the contest, we'll mail you out, and it's all about appreciating infrastructure. And, water and water quality is a major piece of that. And
And your
So-
water does not come from the Charles River.
no, it does not.
All right, well, thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next month.
See you next month.
Thank you for coming.
Welcome.